So this is the lecture on the personas, or actually stakeholders, users, and personas. I'm going to be going over chapter 5 of the About Face textbook. And then I'll return back to the endpoint to kind of show you what to think about as you're making the stakeholders, users, and persona decisions for your Sprint 1 deliverable. But anyway, personas is a way to model users. Modeling meaning abstract out ideas or phenomena from the real world and something that's simpler to understand. And so we're starting on page 75. And so personas, I was kind of talking about, I actually covered quite a bit about personas in the previous videos this week. But as you can see in this photo here, if you're trying to build for everybody, you're just going to build a mess. If you're building for yourself, other people aren't going to appreciate it. You're not going to think about other people and how the ease of use and what the features are. And if you're just building with nobody in particular in mind, it's just the software is going to be all over the place. So what we do is we try to pick out those individuals who are most important, are the grouping of people who are most important for a piece of software. In this case, we have 3 different types of personas. Each have very different needs. And the demonstration here is on cars, but it's just to make things more physical instead of software. And all of the software design is coming from industrial design anyway. So it's important to note is that you can have users or personas of your software that have very different needs, and parts of your software or different types of interfaces of your software can be built in for each of these types of personas or user groups. And there's a way to switch between them or identify the type of persona and how to present the software, how to have the features used for those personas, and how to have the interface relate to them or used for them. So you'll read through this as well. I'm just going to skim through it. Oh, this wasn't as important to talk about. So, based on research is actually an important part. So real personas is based on real UX research. It's interviewing a lot of users or potential users and trying to aggregate their differences and their needs together and try to abstract groupings or attributes or needs of large groupings of users into these persona traits. So we will not be doing all this interviewing and massive amounts of people. You're just going to have to reflect back to periods of your life where you yourself interacted with a lot of the people. So luckily, you're making stuff for students. You're a student. And if you decide to make stuff for middle school or high school or college level students, you have experienced that. So you're going to reflect back in your life and think about all these people, all these other students at the same age group, and reflect on what their needs were, what the different types of them were. Try to do this this psychological profile or this almost this interviewing of your memories of what these people are like, and try to get some aggregate features, try to group these people and try to pick a persona. And yes, personas are represented as individual people, but you have to be careful. It's not you, and it's not somebody specific in your life or that you met or that you make up. Those are all mistakes. They're actually just a fake aggregate person, an avatar, and a way for, as you build software, something very easy to think about, like this represents a swath or a grouping of people that I think my software would be useful for. So even though we represent a persona as an individual, they actually represent a group of people or a set of behavioral patterns of people. And so in the previous video, I did use a term like stereotype because it's easy for everyone to understand. You're stereotyping behavioral patterns or are characteristics of groups of people. But so it's an easy term to start the discussion, but to be accurate, we're not actually stereotyping. We're developing archetypes, our user archetypes. So an archetype, if you know story or narrative design, is a character that's been developed that has certain features that play really well into a story. So a persona is the same thing. It's just an abstraction of your users that play really well and help you designing your software. Personas have, so they have motivations and goals. Oops, drawing error. Hold on one sec. Let me just try to reopen the textbook. 1 second. All right, we're back. So personas must have behaviors and motivations, right? So motivations are a big one. And actually, how come it didn't lead into goal? Okay, it's goals down here. I'm going to hold off on motivations right now because that leads into goals. But yes, personas can represent non-users or what we're talking about, stakeholders, people who are still important to your software, but will actually not use it or use it very lightly or in different ways. And the core users, you have users representing different roles in your software. But since we are doing very simply, we're looking at a primary persona, who is the core student that you're hoping to solve their learning challenges with. Some of you might just pick a generic student, maybe something that represents you a while ago. Some of you have talked to me and you're interested in your siblings or people you know that may have autism or some type of learning disability or challenge. And that's completely fine, but you have to try again to abstract this type of person, this trait. So if it, for example, autism, that would be one of the major traits you're looking at. Using this educational technology is useful for users group, right? A section of users who all have some are on the autistic spectrum. Or this technology way of presenting education would be useful for them. So they talk about other ways to slice up this idea of users, user roles, user profiles, and market segments. And these are all very interesting and useful, but they're different than personas. But there's ways to pull data from them to build persona if you have them. But what I did want to talk about is behaviors, goals, motivations. So this is all very similar. That there's a point that this persona has a backstory, has a rationale why they would use this software. They have goals in mind, they have actions and behaviors based on their thoughts, and they have motivation. So all this, the behaviors and the actions pull into their motivations. Their motivation pushes them to try to achieve the goals that they're setting. So you'll see that goals are listed, talked about a lot in these UX books. And as far as users, because a user or persona, they're not going to use your software unless they have a goal in mind. No one's going to open a piece of software for just the hell of it. They wish to achieve something. They want some information. They want to process something. They need to get some aspect of their work done. They need to get some aspect of their social life done, whatever. There is a goal. That goal is being driven by motivation. And so this section is actually really important to read through here at the end. And this is toward where I say you can wrap up your suggested reading of this chapter. If this really interests you, you can keep going. The chapter goes on for a few more pages. Don Norman is a huge name in the field. All of his theories and frameworks are used extensively. But if you wish to read more about the theory and the frameworks and modeling of users, and then they go on a bit more. But this is kind of getting beyond the scope of the class. But yes, there's different types of user goals, and there's different ways to model these users to best design your software. but the chapter ends about here. So constructing users. Yes, personas, sorry. So you basically don't want a lot of overlap. They have to be very distinct and very clear, but we're only making one persona, so you don't really need to worry about this stuff. But you can read through this if you care to. So, perfect. So let me bring this back to stakeholders and users. For your section, these are the sections of people who are very important for you to consider. They have some type of interest, some type of role you need to think about as you design software, and they don't always have to be users. Teachers aren't going to be users. Parents aren't going to be users. The students in a whole will not be users, but there is a subsection of the students that we think will be the users. So again, these are stakeholders, and here's the users. And users are always a subset of stakeholders. So as your software grows, you might actually start developing more users. So for example, I would think about if I grew my educational app, that there's a part of it for teachers where they can assign sections of my app to different student users through their email. And maybe even like a way for parents to check in, make sure the students are getting work. But I'm not there yet, so I'm only considering this. So for personas, definitely have a name, an age, a gender, a generic location or geography, and then this you can consider like personality, personal notes, just some background biography about them. And there's a few bullet points that you can add in there. I would go minimum 2 and max 4. And so student notes, specifically about this persona being a student or a learner, and what are their specific personality traits dealing with learning and being a student. So this one is really the bulk of it, or the core of who a student is. So I would say minimum is 3, maximum is 4. Bullet points. It'd be nice to get a photo. This, at least you can look at somebody as you think about building it. This I did a Google search. We found somebody that we thought represented this persona really well. We just copied and pasted it in. We cropped it. We shrunked it. And there's certain alignment or formatting features you can select for photos or images so that they kind of sit nicely next to your text. And then last but not least is your justification. So again, I don't want it to be random characteristics. I don't want it to be you. I don't want it to be somebody in your life, although they can help inspire it. And so I need to know why you made your choices, so that at least I can see that you put some critical thought into trying to aggregate, trying to build a correct persona, a correct archetype of a group of users, which is the correct way to approach software design.